There was a time when being unavailable meant nothing. You didn't have to explain it. You didn't have to justify it. You didn't have to apologize for it. If you didn't respond, life simply continued. That time is gone. Today, availability is assumed. Responsiveness is expected. Silence requires explanation. You notice it in small moments. You reach for your phone without deciding to. You answer messages before finishing a thought. You feel a subtle pressure when notifications stack, even when nothing is urgent. Not panic, not fear. Obligation. The sense that you're supposed to be reachable, that you're supposed to react, that staying engaged is the default state. And when you don't, something feels off. You check again, you respond, just in case. You stay present, even when there's nothing meaningful to add. This is the signal. Not addiction, not distraction, not lack of discipline. A shift in expectation. Engagement is no longer optional. It's continuous. You're not just consuming information. You're maintaining visibility, replying to confirm you're still there, reacting to prove awareness, participating to avoid disappearance. And none of it feels dramatic. It's quiet, routine, normalized. That's what makes it effective. At some point, you stop asking whether you want to engage. You only ask how quickly you should. The moment a message arrives, your attention the moment something updates, your focus fractures. The moment you step away, a background tension appears. Not because you're missing something important, but because disengaging now feels like a risk. And slowly, the mind adapts. You begin to think in fragments. You anticipate interruption. You structure thoughts around the expectation of being pulled away. Deep focus becomes rare. Rest becomes shallow. Silence becomes incomplete. Evan Winjo Rialone. Part of you remains online. Listening, waiting, ready to respond. This is the part most people don't notice. The problem isn't that attention is being taken. It's that attention is being held hostage by default. You don't lose focus in a single moment. You lose it by never fully reclaiming it. There is always another signal. Another update, another reason to stay connected just a little longer. And over time, that constant engagement starts to feel normal, necessary, even, but a system that never allows disengagement doesn't create awareness. It creates fatigue disguised as participation. This isn't about technology. It is about what happens when a human mind is placed inside an environment that never fully lets it go, and why being always on feels less like a choice and more like an order you never remember agreeing to. What keeps people engaged isn't urgency. It's uncertainty. The human brain is extremely sensitive to unresolved signals, an unanswered message, an unread notification, a pending update. Each one creates a small open loop, and the brain doesn't like open loops, not because they're important, but because, evolutionarily, unresolved signals meant danger. Something unfinished meant something could still happen. Modern systems exploit that reflex perfectly. They don't demand your attention. They withhold closure. You're never fully done, never fully caught up, never fully clear. There is always something just outside your awareness, and the brain responds by staying alert, checking again, scanning again, refreshing again, not because it enjoys it, but because disengaging feels irresponsible. This is where the shift happens. Attention stops being a tool. It becomes a defense mechanism. People don't stay engaged because they care deeply about everything they see. They stay engaged because the cost of not knowing feels higher than the cost of exhaustion. Missing something feels worse than being tired. So the mind adapts. It learns to operate in fragments, to expect interruption, to never fully settle into one thought. You start multitasking, not to be efficient, but to reduce anxiety, keeping one eye open at all times. This is why constant engagement feels draining in a very specific way. Not loud exhaustion, not emotional collapse. A dull cognitive fatigue, the kind that makes everything feel slightly heavier, that blurs priorities, that flattens emotional contrast. And yet, people blame themselves. I can't focus anymore. My attention span is broken. I should be more disciplined. But discipline isn't the missing piece. The environment is engineered to prevent closure. A human brain placed in a system with no natural stopping points will not rest, it will over. Always partially engaged, never fully present, never fully offline. This is why silence feels uncomfortable now. Not because it's empty, but because it removes the background noise the brain has learned to lean on. In constant engagement, the mind doesn't have to face itself. Disengagement brings everything back at once. Thoughts, emotions, unprocessed tension. So people stay connected, not to gain information, but to avoid confrontation with internal quiet. The system doesn't need to trap you. It only needs to make disengagement feel heavier than participation. And once that balance tips, the war is effectively won. Not by force. A system that demands constant engagement doesn't need to control what you think. It only needs to control when you stop thinking. When attention has no natural endpoint, the mind never resets. When engagement is continuous, awareness becomes shallow. When disengagement feels risky, participation becomes automatic. This is the real cost of being always on. Not distraction, not addiction, not information overload, loss of depth. A mind that never disengages cannot reflect. A mind that never pauses cannot reorient. A mind that never goes offline cannot tell what actually matters. Everything feels equally urgent, equally present, equally demanding. And when everything matters, nothing truly does. This is how attention turns against the individual. You respond faster than you decide. React before you evaluate. Stay connected even when connection offers no value. Not because you're weak, but because the environment is structured to punish absence. Silence lowers visibility. Invisibility feels like disappearance. Disappearance triggers anxiety. So engagement becomes the safer option. This is why constant connectivity doesn't bring clarity. It brings compliance. The system doesn't need to force participation. It only needs to remove the feeling of safety from disengagement. Once that happens, people regulate themselves. They check without being asked, respond without being needed, stay present without being present. And over time, the internal reference point erodes. You stop knowing when to stop. You stop trusting silence. You stop experiencing attention as something you own. It becomes something you maintain. This is the war most people don't recognize. Not a war for information, but a war for attention cycles. Who decides when you pause? Who defines when you rest? Who benefits when you never fully disconnect? Because a mind that never returns to zero is easier to steer. It reacts instead of choosing, consumes instead of evaluating, participates instead of observing. And in that state, control doesn't feel imposed, it feels normal. That's the final signal. When constant engagement stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like responsibility, by then, the system doesn't need to act. You already are. Before you leave, take a second to check if you're a subscribed. Most people think they are, they usually aren't.